Welcome in the Quest Number 9 podcast. My name is Seth Warner, and today we're going to talk about Kentucky basketball from a fan's perspective. On this episode, we're going to be talking about Kentucky roster updates and more, just talking about what has conspired the last few days with Kentucky getting a new commitment. And here to help us talk about that is Brandon Ramsey. Brandon, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Seth, for having me on today. I'm Brandon Ramsey from Kentucky Sports Radio. I've been with them off and on for, I guess, probably the better part of a decade now. But I have a background as a college basketball coach for a while, and then got back into kind of I don't really consider myself media because I don't go to like press conferences and things like that, but I'm sort of on the outskirts of media, which is kind of where I enjoy it to be. I don't have to do some of the hard hitting stuff that guys like Jack Pilgrim and Tyler Thompson and those true professionals do. I kind of get to stick in my own lane and do my own thing. But I do all the kind of film breakdowns and scouting reports, all that kind of stuff. And you can follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. But yeah, excited to be here and talking about some Kentucky basketball.
Yeah. Kentucky, like I was talking about earlier, a lot of new stuff going on. Kentucky got their new commitment from, it was Florida transfer Denzel Barron.
Denzel Aberdeen.
Aberdeen. I was trying to figure out how to pronounce that for a second. Florida transfer, sixth man. What have you seen from him?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you can get a guy that was a key contributor for the national championship team, I mean, how can you not be excited about that? I know if you just kind of go and look at the box scores or go and look at his stats, I mean, he averaged 7.7 points per game. Maybe that's not going to get you jumping up and down in your room. But again, when you consider that this is a guy that was a big part of a team that went to go on and win a national championship, and the versatility he brings in the backcourt, I think he'll add some ball handling for Kentucky as a catch and shoot guy off the ball. His percentages were pretty high this past season. He's a really versatile and athletic defender as well. So I think there's a lot to be excited about landing a guy like Denzel Aberdeen from Florida.
I
Yeah.
see them kind of similar with like their role, good defenders, potential shooting ability. How do you see them translating?
Yeah, they're with Mo Diabate from Alabama and then Aberdeen, and they're different positionally, but I think you're absolutely right that in terms of their role on the team, in terms of kind of I think Aberdeen is that versatile piece in the backcourt, whereas Diabate is kind of that versatile piece in the front court where he can slide down to the wing a little bit and play the three. He's probably more comfortable playing the four. He's a left-handed guy that really handle the ball and get to the basket. He was able to make some open threes at Alabama, and obviously that's a very fast-paced offense, kind of like what Kentucky likes to do. He had a lot of success in transition as well, and I think that he will certainly help on the defensive side of the ball. And I think those two additions you're talking about with Aberdeen and Diabate, not only do they have high-level SEC experience, which is certainly valuable. I mean, Diabate played in the Final Four 2 years ago at Alabama. Aberdeen won the national championship this season at Florida. Those guys both are really going to help you in terms of improving your athleticism, your length, your defensive versatility. So I think those guys both check some really important boxes for Kentucky this offseason.
And then with Kentucky having a big transfer portal class coming in, who do you think is going to be the most instant impact player out of the five guys?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think when you're looking at true instant impact, I mean, it's probably going to be Jalen Lowe, the point guard from Pittsburgh. But I think that Jaden Quainance probably has the highest upside. But since you use the term right away, let's face it, I think there's probably a decent chance that Jaden Quainance misses a little
Yeah.
bit of time, still coming off of his ACL injury. So, but I think anytime you add your starting point guard, I mean that's going to be a massive impact piece, and I think that seeing him come from Pittsburgh, where he already was an All ACC performer this past season as a sophomore, you hope to see his shooting numbers improve a little bit, but just in terms of what he does as a playmaker, I mean he's so dynamic with the ball in his hands, and I think that you're going to see Kentucky have a level of individual playmaking kind of centered around Jalen Lowe that was probably unlike anything we saw this past season. That's something that I think Big Blue Nation can get excited about.
And he's a guy that is a really good playmaker and can do a lot of different things. His steal rate is something that I saw that's really high.
Yeah.
That's something Kentucky struggled with. And also, he's had a triple-double last year, just showing some of his multi-ability impact. Who out of the returning pieces do you think will take the biggest jump?
I think the easy answer to that question is going to be probably split between Colin Chandler and Brandon Garrison. I'm probably looking to Colin Chandler as a returner that can really make a leap this year. I think from the beginning he was a guy that had super high potential because he's so athletic with some good positional size on the wing. He's pretty comfortable handling the ball. He's pretty comfortable shooting the ball. We saw him really turn into a high level defender late in the season this past year. And I think that over the course of that last month or so, where he really got thrown into the fire, unfortunately, due to some injuries that Kentucky had, I think you were able to see it almost on a game to game basis where Colin Chandler got so much more comfortable. And I think that now having a full off season, now removed from his 2 year mission trip, which obviously gave him more of a learning curve coming into Kentucky than a lot of people have. I think now with a full off season, being able to get his feet wet this past season, I think you're going to see him, not necessarily become some all SEC contributor, but I think you're going to see him be a really, really impactful piece to what I expect to be a really good Kentucky team this year.
One of the better, I think he'll probably be one of the better six man in the SEC. It's kind of the role I see him fitting with this Kentucky team this past year, making a Sweet 16. How do you think the coaching staff has adjusted, or the difference between the strengths and weaknesses and the similarities between these two teams?
Yeah, I think that you've definitely seen, in my opinion, an emphasis on addressing some of the weaknesses from this past year. Because if you think about it, one of the things you heard all this past season that Kentucky struggled with at times, it was certainly on the defensive side of the ball, especially early in the season. We know that Kentucky wasn't very good defensively. There were times that, especially in the gauntlet that was the SEC play, that athleticism and kind of some team strength and physicality were an issue as well. And then we've just ran through a lot of the names, but between Denzel Aberdeen, Jalen Lowe bringing some athleticism in the backcourt, Mo Diabate, another physical athletic force in the front court, Jaden Quainitz, who's probably as physical as anybody in college basketball, even being as young as he is. And then don't forget about Cam Williams as well from Tulane, the very first edition, who's a 6'8", 200+ pound versatile wing as well. So I think you really saw an emphasis to, like, okay, we don't want to go away from being a team that can shoot the ball, being a team that can play with pace and be a top 10 or so offense in college basketball, but we know we have to improve defensively, and we know we have to get more athletic. So you're kind of trying to hold some of that offensive ability constant while improving defensively and improving athletically, and I think that you really saw this Kentucky team do that. So I think that's where they really improved. Now, my only slight question mark going into this year, and I probably am not as worried about it as some people are, but I don't think that on paper Kentucky improved their shooting ability. Probably, if anything, they took a small step back from last season's roster to this upcoming season's roster. But I just think that you'll see the offense probably operate a little bit differently. But I think pretty much across the board, otherwise, this is just a better team with better talent than what we saw in 24-25.
Yeah, and you were talking about Jaden Quaintance with him, something that people don't always recognize. He graduated high school at 16 years old. That's just insane. That you hear reclass guys, but they're usually old for their
Right.
class. Like Cooper Flack, he
Hmm.
would have turned 19 in his early in his freshman year of college,
Right.
but he's just turning 18. So that's just kind of the difference. He's like could still be in high school one more year.
Yes.
He could be the same age as Tyron Stokes,
Right.
if you're thinking like that. So that's just a crazy thing with him. And then how do you see his role fitting? Do you think he's more of a four? Do you think they can develop that skill, or do you think he's more of a true five?
I think he can play the four some. I think that his role at Kentucky will probably be more at the five spot, just in terms of need. I think that it's honestly easier for Brandon Garrison to slide to the four, just because we saw him start to be able to shoot some threes towards the end of last season, and I would assume that with a full off season, that will only improve for him. So I think that you'll probably see Jaden Quaintance primarily at the five because he's a guy that can bang around in the post some. He's a guy that you can run things for, and him to throw it inside for him and just score it in the post. He's one of the best interior defenders in all of college basketball. He's going to protect the rim. He's going to rebound at a really high level. I think with him, it's just all going to be about the how he recovers from an injury. I mean, anytime you're as big as he is, being a 6'9", 6'10", 230 pound guy that relies on his athleticism and physicality, you got to make sure that knee heals perfectly in order for him to be super effective. So I think that at what point
Mm.
before or early on in the season does he get back on the court is something to watch for, and then obviously keeping him healthy throughout the season will be an ongoing, something that's certainly important for Kentucky. But if Jaden Quaintance is healthy, I have really no reservations about what he's going to be. I think that he's a guy that's going to be a NBA. He's going to be an NBA lottery pick. He's going to be the first, first round NBA lottery pick of the Coach Pope era. He's a guy that legitimately could be like a defensive player of the year type of player. At Kentucky, I think he could be an All SEC type contributor as well. And it's just going to kind of come down to how many games he plays in a Kentucky uniform this year.
And also with him, he another kind of crazy stat is he was a all Big 12 defensive team player too. That just shows you in a very competitive Big 12, he was one
Right.
of the top 15 defenders. And another guy, Cam Williams out of Tulane. How do you see his role at Kentucky?
Yeah, I think he's one that kind of can be easily forgotten about because compared to these other guys, it seems like he committed so long ago because it was literally the day. I mean, we were hours before even playing Tennessee in the Sweet 16 when Cam Williams committed, so it was actually still during the season. But he's a guy that I'm really excited about because he. I think another thing that with these transfer portal additions that we're talking about, I think you also saw a shift from in year one, Coach Pope was behind the eight ball a little bit. He didn't get his first transfer portal commitment until April 21st, which was yesterday, the first time around. Now we were literally done essentially as of yesterday on April
Mhm.
21st. And I think that he kind of had to take what he could get in order to build a competitive roster in year one, and that and in order to do that, he had to take a lot of kind of one and done fifth year seniors. Now you've seen this shift trying to get some guys with multiple years of eligibility. Cam Williams certainly being one of those who was just a freshman this past season at Tulane, but playing in Conference USA, or sorry, playing in the American Athletic Conference, one of the better mid-major conferences in college basketball. This is a guy that made over 63s as a freshman, shooting about 40% from three. So I think earlier I talked about some of the question marks about the shooting on this roster. Cam Williams is a big time shooter. He proved it already at a pretty high level as a freshman. You have to assume that's only going to improve for him. And then once again, you have some positional versatility there, some additional length and athleticism on the wing. I really like what Cam Williams is going to bring to the
Mhm.
table for this Kentucky team.
And another guy, Jasper Johnson, true freshman, playing at OTE. How do you think his high school game and playing at OTE is going to help translate to the Kentucky game?
I think there's some good things and some bad things about coming from overtime elite. I think overall you've probably seen it be a net positive for guys transitioning to the college level, just because I mean, it is kind of like basketball becomes your life when you go to overtime elite, just like it does at the college level. A lot of times, as opposed to having to go through the general grind of just being like a normal high school student. Like there's nothing really normal about overtime elite. But just playing at that level of competition, both in practice every day, the level of coaching they receive, and then certainly at the competition in their games, I think that'll help Jasper Johnson. And he's so athletic, he's so shifty with the ball. He's a guy that if he's ready right away, he's a guy that's going to certainly help Kentucky maintain that shooting ability from this past season to next season. So yeah, I think he's one that in my opinion, there's probably a pretty wide spectrum of what he could be like. I think there's a world where Jasper Johnson is one of the most talented basketball players on the team next year. I also think there's a world where Jasper Johnson maybe doesn't even help Kentucky in the games very much. And I think part of that's just being a kind of a skinnier freshman that you're not exactly sure
Mhm.
how that's going to translate to the Southeastern Conference right away. He's a guy that's been kind of a high volume scorer at different times through AAU and high school ball, but you can't debate the talent that Jasper Johnson has, and I think that'll probably be able to push him certainly into the rotation and making a big
Mhm.
splash for Kentucky. But I think it'll be really interesting to see what Kentucky gets out of him this year.
And he's kind of known as a tough shot maker. So,
Yep.
and another guy, Brandon Garrison, you kind of touched on him a little bit. How do you see his transition going into year two? And do you think he could be a consistent four? You were saying something about that.
Yeah, I think you're gonna see a different Brandon Garrison this year than you saw last season, in my opinion. I think that across college basketball over these last 3, 4, 5 years of the transfer portal really becoming a big part of building rosters, you've seen pretty much across the board where when you can get a transfer and then have them for multiple years, that's where some development really starts to take place. So I think from having sophomore Brandon Garrison to junior Brandon Garrison under the tutelage of Coach Pope and the staff at Kentucky, I think you're going to really see him, accentuate his strengths, kind of start to limit some of his weaknesses and improve on those. And I think that, I was really high on Brandon Garrison even through a lot of this past season. I think that some of the things he does, you just can't teach, and he has some intrinsic abilities and talent that you simply can't teach. And I think that you'll see some of that really start to shine now as a junior at Kentucky. So I'm really excited about just the kind of the upside potential of guys like Brandon Garrison and Jaden Quainitz in Kentucky's front court.
And also with Brandon Garrison, one of the things I saw that I really liked is his switchability. He did a good job laterally, and that's something that guys his size usually struggle with. So I thought he did a good job of using his length while still being able to laterally stay with those shiftier guards.
It's an
So
outstanding point. Yeah, he did a great job of that. I thought it was something that I touched on a lot, and some of my film room breakdowns throughout the season was how much I liked Brandon Garrison's ability to switch. When I think back to that the game at Oklahoma when Kentucky won, and then there were times where he was doing the best job of anybody on Jeremiah Fears. Like he would get switched on to Jeremiah Fears. It's gonna be him be a lottery pick, a
mhm.
6'1", 6'2" guard, and he was guarding him as well as anybody on Kentucky's team. So I think that's a great point about what Brandon Garrison can bring defensively, especially with that switchability, as you said.
And it wasn't like it was a soft switch either. It was they were in an
Yeah, it's
ISO.
aggressive.
Yeah. So another guy that Kentucky picked up is Andrew Jovic
I,
out
I,
of
I believe we're going with, and I could be wrong on this too. It's obviously a tough pronunciation, and I haven't heard any of the pros at Kentucky come out and give us one yet, but I think it's Andrij Jelovich.
okay.
So we're going to go with that, but don't quote
Audrey
me on that
Jones.
one either.
All right, I think that sounds like what I think Jack or one of them
Uh,
said. 6'11", forward, really versatile, coming out of Europe. So playing on one of the better teams in Europe, I heard you talking about. So what are your thoughts on his game and how that transition?
Yeah, I'm really excited about Yelovich. I think that if you kind of think about what you want out of a forward in Coach Pope's offense, it's kind of like the perfect replica of what you would want. You have a guy with some real size who's versatile and super athletic. He's a guy that can run the floor at a really high level. He's pretty quick laterally. That's like we were just talking about with Brandon Garrison. I think he's going to be a switchable defender out on the perimeter some too. But then he has a little bit of a pop and a burst vertically as well, whether that's blocking shots or getting up to dunk the basketball on the roll or on the rim run, different things like that. I think you saw him over the course of 2 years in the Adriatic League with Mega Bamax's team. I think he made 49 threes in 50 games over the course of 2 years at about 30%. So you would like to see that volume and that percentage increase a little bit. But to me, his shot looks good when I watch him on film. I think that he'll make open shots that the Kentucky offense creates for him, and he'll be very comfortable kind of handling the ball out on the perimeter like you see, last season with Amari Williams, Brandon Garrison, Andrew Carr, what they were asked to do as offensive initiators. I think that you're going to see Andrij Jelovich be asked to do a lot of those things and be very comfortable doing this. I mean, he has as much kind of untapped talent probably as anybody on this team. I mean, he's a guy that's played legitimate professional basketball in like a borderline top 10 league in the entire world, which I think is exciting. He's going to be 21 years old here in about a month or so. So he'll be 21 throughout his entire first year of NCAA basketball, which is exciting. And yeah, I think that you got kind of a plug and play, really important piece there at the kind of that four spot for Kentucky in Yelovich.
And also with him coming from Europe, how do you think that transition will go for him from that league to the SEC?
Yeah, I think that anytime you come from a place that is kind of plays a different style of basketball, it can take a minute. But what I like about him is that he's so athletic and so And he has some physicality to him as well. That having played professional basketball, I don't think that transition to the SEC, which admittedly, like I know it's a pro league. I said it's a top 10 league in the world. Like the SEC is a higher level of basketball than what he was playing. It's close, but it's definitely the SEC is a higher level. So like just the level of play will be a step up. But I don't think that it's going to be a huge learning curve in terms of the physicality and athleticism, which I think will allow him to function kind of from day one right away. So I honestly don't worry about that transition for him as much as I would maybe some other European big men that are, maybe skinnier or just not as athletic or not as physical. I don't think that he'll have any problem kind of stepping in and being ready for the Southeastern Conference kind of right away.
And with the front court, who are you thinking that will be really the main guys that you would have as the starters?
Yeah, I think that, probably to begin the season, it'll be, in my opinion, it's probably going to be Yelovich. I think he's just too talented to not start at the four, and then probably Brandon Garrison. Once Jaden Quanis is back and healthy, it's going to be really hard to keep him off of the floor. But just, anytime you have those big guys, like, that they kind of need to split minutes pretty much anyway. I do think you'll see some lineups where you play Garrison and Quaintance together, but I think that you're going to see kind of a three-man rotation with those guys, and then Mo Diabate is going to be able to certainly play a lot of minutes at the four as well. So I think you're going to see a situation honestly where if you kind of there's 40 minutes to play at the four, there's 40 minutes to play at the five. I think that probably those four guys are going to split the minutes probably pretty evenly. I think that Yelovich and Diabate will pretty much split the minutes at the four, and I think that Garrison and Quaintance eventually will pretty much split the minutes at the five, and I think that honestly, especially with Malachi Moreno kind of waiting in the wings there as well in the front court, you have some depth and some versatility across those positions that I think Kentucky should be really excited about where their front court lies right now.
And then with the backcourt, having multiple guys that are kind of solidified with Lowe and with Otega Owe, most likely pulling his name out of the draft. But how do you see that shooting guard spot filling out?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most wide open position at this point. I think if certainly you pencil in Otega Owe as a starter on the wing. We all know that we all know that Jalen Lowe is going to start at the point guard position. So then do you just go ahead and start Denzel Aberdeen at the two and kind of slide him in behind Jalen Lowe when he comes out to handle the ball? Does Colin Chandler make that jump that I'm kind of expecting and emerge as a potential starting shooting guard? Even like Jasper Johnson, he's a five-star, kind of all-American type player. Like I'm sure he's coming in, hoping to earn a starting role as well, and certainly has the talent to do it. So I do think that's a really wide open position at this point where any three of those guys could start on game one, and it wouldn't shock me right now. If I kind of had to handicap it at this point, probably just because of the experience, it would seem like the Denzel Aberdeen might have kind of the inside track to being that other starter, just because he's started some games at Florida this past year, has a national championship pedigree, as we've talked about, a really versatile two-way guard. But it wouldn't shock me at all if the younger guys, Colin Chandler or Jasper Johnson, kind of really compete for those minutes at the two.
And who do you think out of this whole roster is probably the most surprising player? Kind of take a Otega Owe kind of leap that has the tools, but will be a guy that, he's averaging double-digit points when we're getting in January.
I'm going to go back to Colin Chandler. I kind of already used that answer a little bit, but I think it fits here as well. I genuinely think that a guy like Colin Chandler has as much NBA upside as anybody on this team. I think he has all SEC upside. Even again, if it's not this season, it could certainly be next season if he sticks around. I just think that what he can do athletically, handling the ball, shooting the ball, playmaking, then on the defensive end of the floor as well. I think that he's a guy that, as you mentioned, you could look up in January, February, and like, oh man, Colin Chandler's averaging 12 points a game. He's shooting 38% from three, and he's been one of our best defenders all season long. That wouldn't shock me at all if we're having that conversation as we kind of get into the meat of SEC play.
And I would agree with that, especially after playing Vandy, who most years isn't an NCAA tournament team, but this year they were. Mm-hmm. And he was basically our point guard for that game and did a little bit of everything for Kentucky and was just able to really hold down that spot while Kentucky had some injuries.
Yeah, I'm really excited about what he could become this year. I think he's
Mm-hmm.
gonna really break out and have an outstanding year.
And how do you view with some of the other freshmen turning to sophomore how their roles are going to play, especially after Caden Lewis decommitted?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at, obviously you'd be talking about Travis Perry and Trent Noah, the two in-state Kentucky guys at this point. But those are two guys that, and it's no disrespect to them, but that they were never expected to play a meaningful minute last season, and they kind of got thrust into the action, and a lot of credit goes to them for handling that pretty darn well. And I mean, Travis Perry ended up starting some games last year. Trent Noah played very meaningful minutes in SEC play for Kentucky. And those guys, I mean, heck, they were a big part of us beating Tennessee in one of the games. And for guys that that when the season started, they were the 11th and 12th men. They were not in the rotation. Like when Kentucky played Duke and some of those better teams early in the year, they didn't get into the game because that just wasn't their role early on, and then they had to play. Now I think with the way Kentucky's built out this roster, like somebody has to be the 12th and 13th guys, and like it's not a slight to kind of move them back into those roles. They're now, because of the experience they gained last year, they're overqualified for those roles, but that's probably going to be their role. So I think there's going to be games where Travis Perry and Trent Noah don't play. There'll be other games where they do play and play in a significant role because they've already shown they can do that. But personally, with the depth that Coach Pope and the staff has built with this roster, I wouldn't expect a whole lot out of those guys this season. Again, not because they can't do it, but it's because there's other guys that I think are more talented and ready to contribute at a higher level right now. And you're not going to play 13 guys. You're going to settle into playing, 9, 10, at most 11 guys. And I just see them being on the outside looking in of that rotation.
All right, that's all from the Quest Number 9 podcast. My name is Seth Warner, and please like and subscribe on this video. You can go find me at Quest Number 9 on Instagram and Twitter, AKX, and I will see you next time.